This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Blissed? Here we go. Your dial's set correctly to USAPrepares.com. And we're broadcasting live 9 o'clock and 10 o'clock right here on Genesis Communications from high atop the Missouri Ozark Mountains. Information's on the website, USAPREPARES.com. Dave's producing the broadcast from Minnesota. If you'd like to call, 866-582-9933. 866-582-9933. Converging threats are confronted daily by your instructors. I'm Vincent Finelli. Dr. Julie Pennick is with us. She is a nurse practitioner. She is an instructor. She's a PhD. And we're going to talk about what's happening in medicine. Welcome, Dr. Julie Pennick.
Good morning, Vince. How are you?
I am really well, and you? It's great to hear your voice.
Hey, what? It's great to hear my voice? Oh, well, thanks. How are things in Radio Land?
Well, they're expanding. Dr. Pennick, we are now, since you and I have last talked, we are now on satellite radio, Galaxy 19, at the first of next month, was just a couple weeks away, actually less than that. We're going to be broadcasting in Europe, North Africa, Russia, and the Middle East. Radio stations are picking up the broadcasts, and we're growing. So
wow.
That's what's happening. That's what's happening in Radioland.
That's amazing.
Well, yeah, but I got released from KWTO.
Oh. Oh, well, I know you're crying over that, right?
Well, we all knew it was going to happen. We just, we didn't know when, but we knew it was going to happen. As a matter of fact, let me share a story with you. Really interesting. One of our instructors, his name is David Klotz. And do you know about the situation with Walmart in Springfield, how they want to expand with yet another? Okay. Uh-huh. Well, what he did was he decided that he thought that since City Council just kind of approved the expansion of Walmart into to replace a church, he would gather enough signatures to bring it before the city for a vote. So he brought it before the city. Or he got enough 1,800 signatures. He got it, the petition signed by 1,800 people, brought it to City Council, and they decided that they would have to bring it to the community for a vote, which was a good thing. If the community wants a Walmart, great. If they don't want a Walmart, great. So let it be up to the people who live there. Okay. We were talking about that on the radio, and the next day he got fired from his job.
Oh. Wow. I guess we know
that.
where they stand in support, huh?
Yeah, well, not only that. There are two big television stations in Springfield, and they did a report on it. And both of those reporters got in trouble for allowing our instructor to talk about Walmart on TV.
Wow.
Not only that, but there's another broadcaster on the other side of town. And he's a morning broadcaster, and he's probably the other largest broadcast in town. So he's in the morning, and he let our instructor talk for too long about Walmart, and he got in trouble. So the word on the street is, if you don't want to get in trouble, you don't put on USA Prepares. Yeah, and certainly don't put on our instructor, David Klotz. So I just wanted to share that with you. So the casualties were pretty great. I guess David Klotz got the hammer, the hit with the hammer the hardest because he got fired. I just got, my contract was not renewed. But other people, everybody who got involved in talking about it at least got chewed out, at least. So I just wanted to share that with you. Yeah.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Good thing I work for myself. I guess I don't have to worry about being fired.
Well, that's kind of how I feel. It's...
Yeah. Yeah. Love that.
That's absolutely. So you are an independent entrepreneur, and you have a healthcare practice. Would you share with our new class members what you do, so they get a feel for what we're going to be talking about and why, in the perspective you come from?
Well, I'm a family nurse practitioner. Have been for some 16, almost 17 years. I learned very quickly when I got on this side of the healthcare ball that conventional medicine doesn't have enough answers, and conventional medical therapies are, for the most part, on the medical side of things. I'm not saying surgery, because surgery can certainly cure things, right? If you take something out, it's cured. Well, you didn't restore function to the body, and you actually altered function. But on the medical side of things, treatment is aimed at getting rid of symptoms. Treatment isn't necessarily aimed at restoration of normal function. And so people are happy if you get rid of their symptoms, but the symptom was there because the body was trying to tell you something was out of balance. And so rather than go look for something to rebalance, oftentimes conventional medicine prescribes a medication to shut up the symptom, and so for a while people are happy. But that doesn't restore normal function to the body, and this body was created in the image of perfection. So my practice focuses on alternative and complementary therapies aimed at the restoration of balance in the body that's demonstrating symptoms so that the body can heal. And so that's what I do. And so that's not embraced or a focus of many healthcare practices. And so people who have an interest in restoration of balance and return to normal functioning are the people who come and see me.
So, Dr. Pennick, when you're on the same side of the equation as Dr. Norman Shealy, and you two worked together for quite a while.
Yeah. And I treasure him as my greatest teacher, mentor when it comes to the type of approaches that I take to healthcare. Absolutely, he's one of my dearest friends, and he's my collaborator, and we have a continuing relationship now since 1996.
And both of you are not afraid of speaking your mind and not backing down from your researched opinions. If you feel something, and neither, yeah, right. So you're not going to bow down to the.
Why should anybody fear the truth? Why should anybody fear the truth?
Well, especially if you don't
know the truth, and the truth shall set you free.
Yeah, especially if you don't have a job, you don't have to worry about explaining the truth.
Well, that's why I work for myself.
Well, okay, no, I want that was one of the points that I wanted to discuss with you. All of us who have seemed to come together, on this radio broadcast, have an enormous degree of independence. Now, I don't think it was, let's build an organization and independence is the core. What happened was people seemed to become attached to this radio broadcast who are all independent. I mean, we all came to this point of view in this lifestyle separately. And we want to be independent on every level of our lives if we can. So, but that is not the norm. That is absolutely not the norm as far as I can tell. I think there are only 3% of us who really understand about independence and who are seeking the truth and willing to share the truth at whatever the price may be.
It's a tough position to be in. And a lot of people, I would like to say, a lot of people don't have the luxury of being able to do that. And then when I say that, that really suggests that they don't have a choice, or they're imprisoned by the confines and the boundaries And technically none of us are, but some people feel that they are. And so that's why some people find themselves stuck.
Yeah. Now, in that light, how, well, I don't know how to ask this question, but I'd love to know the answer. I taught at the college level many, many years ago in the 1990s. You're teaching at the college level right now. Now, the level of independence and your line of thinking and your expertise and what you have found firsthand works and what you found that doesn't work firsthand in your practice, how does that fit with the college curriculum of nursing that you're teaching?
Well, I am responsible for teaching the curriculum as prescribed by the organization I teach for, and I absolutely do that. And I use the textbooks. And once we go through the information that is there, I say to my students, now, let me introduce another body of information for you. Not that they're held accountable to it as far as the curriculum goes, but just so that they have exposure to other models of thinking. And then they're adults, so that they take that and do with it what they like. And I'm not sanctioned for that. And I have evidence to back up what I say. And so when we talk about evidence-based medicine, which, by the way, doesn't exist, because all their evidence is flawed and manipulated, I'm going to get in trouble for that. But there's a great Greek physician who took his team and has proven that there really is no such thing as evidence-based medicine. All the numbers tend to have manipulation and flaws in them. And so when we talk about evidence-based medicine, I just suggest that there's another body of knowledge out there that people should partake of. And I want my students to be able to pass their exams, and I want them to be able to pass their licensing exams. And so I teach them the core content, but I also want them to be thinking individuals, and I want them to be able to properly take care of themselves and their family members. And so if I didn't say to them, in addition to this material supplied here, you should look at these issues and give them where to go to look for that, then I would feel like I would be cheating them, and that would not be right.
I couldn't agree with you more. I read an article this morning before the broadcast about a person who was responsible for staying with the ill, and she shut off the alarms so she could go to sleep, meaning the person who was responsible for paying attention to the alarms. Let's talk about that when we get back. Dr. Julie Pennick, Vincent Finelli, USAprepares.com. Dr. Julie Pennick's with us. She's a nurse practitioner. She has worked very closely with Dr. Norman Shealy. She's been at the Get Prepared Expo. And Dr. Pennick, I was reading a post this morning on the internet, and it described I don't know what you would call this person, someone who sits with a person who might be a senior citizen and ill, and kind of stays with that person to see if there's any assistance that can be provided, and if the alarm goes off, to take the appropriate action. Well, the story is about this woman who was sitting with the elderly, and she just shut off the alarm because it interfered with her sleep at night, meaning the person who was supposed to be paying attention wanted to sleep throughout the night and just shut off the alarms. Do we teach ethics that in college today about not doing that kind of thing?
We absolutely do. We absolutely do. In fact, that's part of the content that I teach. And so that would be an unethical decision that individual made. We're not there for us. We are there for the clients that we serve. So did she get fired? Did she get brought up on charges?
I don't know, but if that person worked for me, I could tell you that there would be no second chance.
Right.
That is such a serious violation of my ethics that person would be terminated on the spot. I mean, there'd be no discussion. I mean, maybe there'd be a discussion. Here's what you did, and here's why you're fired, and you're out of here right now.
Did the patient have an untoward or an adverse outcome because of that? What happened to the patient? The patient passed away?
I don't have all the details. I just started reading the article about how how the alarms were shut off. And
Wow.
and I can understand someone doing that, not for the right reasons. I mean, I can understand why someone would be so, why the wrong person could be hired and
Right.
might do that. But it's absolutely unacceptable. Unacceptable. So I just wanted to ask you if we are teaching those kinds of things. And it's kind of like hygiene. If you're working in the food industry, there's certain things that you don't do. And, you make sure your hands are clean so you don't infect the customers. But this is like life and death. Those alarms are there for a reason. Nobody hooks up alarms for fun. There's costs associated with it. So, I mean, this is like one of the highest levels of neglect I can think of, or negligence.
That is negligent, and that's irresponsible, and all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, definitely should be fired, and maybe told why, but maybe not told why.
Yeah. So, do you, in your classes at the college level, do you through scenarios that ethics scenarios, or how would you teach something like this, or would you just explain that you just don't do it?
That's exactly what we do. We do what we call simulations, or where we actually pose a situation like that, or we have what we call case studies, where we pose situations like that, and we ask the students to let us know how they would behave in that, or we give them the scenario and give them the action like this individual took, and ask them how that should have been dealt with. And so they are facilitated through that by someone who's been experienced and done that.
Okay. And what do you find with today's students? Do you find that they do have the ethics that we're looking for, or do we have to teach them about ethics? Do they naturally come to class with the right ethics as you would like to see, or do we have to say no, that's really not acceptable. You need to turn your phone off. You need
actually, they come in very idealistic and very much in the vein of ethics that I would like to see. I can't comment on this particular individual who did that, but I can tell you that our profession is not immune to it like any other profession is. Not everybody goes to the profession who is an ethical, moral individual. And so we're plagued by that in my profession just like every other profession. And so some people have no conscience, and they're not, they don't believe they're going to be held accountable. What I find happens oftentimes is that our students come in very bright, ideal, very ethical, and they get out into a bigger system and don't see the things that we teach them in the classroom always being the priority.
And so my question is, when we come back, how do they react to that when they come back and talk to you about what you taught them and what they see in the real world? Dr. Julie Pennick, Vin Finelli, USAPrepares.com. We'll be right back. Dr. Julie Pennick's with us, and Dr. Pennick, I wanted to share this with you. I don't know if I ever told you, but my very first day in broadcasting in the afternoon, and in Springfield, Missouri, during the first break, the first segment break, there was a commercial for male enhancement, and so I take off my headphones. And, I'm off the air for, 3 minutes of commercials. I take off my headphones. I'm stomping around the studio like, how did that happen? I'm looking at the producer. I'm really stomping. What happened? Who put that on? Why is that on my show? And I was furious. I'm stomping around. And then they play the next commercial. And it's about a storage shed company. And it's this very poorly done commercial. And so I continue stomping around, and then I run out into the front office, and I go, what happened? How did this happen? Who approved this? What are we going to do about it? And they go, don't talk to us. Talk to the advertising guys, the sales guys. So I go, after the broadcast, I go see them, and they say, look, you don't understand. That storage shed company is one of our biggest advertisers. And I go, I don't really care. If they're going to do it, they've got to do a better job than what they're doing. So here's the point of that. The point is, When your students go out, do they stand up and just don't back down when they see the lowest common denominator? Do they, the equivalent of a poor quality commercial, poorly recorded, poorly produced, everything about it was, unacceptable to me, and I was not going to stand for it. And by the way, what the end result was, they had to change their commercial, and they did. And it was really to everybody's benefit, because it was uplifting by the time they were done. I guess they realized, maybe we do have a crappy commercial. So here's the point. Do your students, when they come back to you, do they fight the system and say, no, that's unethical, that's not the way we were taught, we need to fix that, or do they succumb to the system?
No, they do. While they're still students, they absolutely do. In fact, my students have needed to say, no, that's not an appropriate order. No, we're not going to give the patient that medication. No, the patient doesn't need that. And I'm very pleased and very proud of them, because in their decision-making, they were absolutely correct. That does not, however, make them popular. But as long as they can stand with the knowledge base of why they make the decision. So I have had students who had to say to experienced nurses, no, that's not the correct thing for this situation. Makes it very tough for a student to have to stand their ground, but they do. What I try to instill in my students is, whatever you do while you're in school, and we can back you up and support you, and when you're out there in practice, do not forget that the patient is supposed to be the center of everything that we do. But all too often in these complex medical systems that we have, the patient becomes peripheral to the policy, the procedure, the rules, all of the things that the system requires for sustainability of the system, and sometimes the patient gets lost in the system. Let me give you a real quick example. We walk into a room. My student has to do a little procedure with the man in bed number 1. And so he has a tray there, and she's doing what she's supposed to be doing, and I just ask him, can I help cut up his food and get him something to wet his whistle so he'll feel like eating? And we spent about 15 minutes with the man, and we did nothing out of the ordinary. And when we're getting ready to leave, I turned to the man in bed number 2, and I said, is there anything we can do for you? And he said, well, as a matter of fact, there is. So I walked over to his bed, and he just stuck his hand out, and he shook my hand. And I said, okay, well, thanks for the handshake, but what can we do for you? And he said, you just did. And I said, no, sir, we didn't do anything for you. He says, yes, you did. You treated my roommate with kindness and compassion. He said, young lady, I have been in this hospital for 5 days, and you're the first nurse who's made me feel like somebody remembers what they're here for. He says, I have felt like I've been a nuisance to the staff the entire time I've been here, and I've been here for 5 days, and you treated my roommate with kindness and compassion. A patient should never have to say that to anyone, ever. But because we're in such these big systems, the patient absolutely gets pushed to the side, and we've got to look pretty on paper and say we're doing all of these things, which we aren't really doing, but we have to look like we're doing them on paper, because the bodies that certify us are going to come and look to see if we're doing these things. And the advent of the electronic health record has just been disastrous, in my opinion, because people just get in there and click, 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 click. They did all these things, and I'm going to tell you that they don't do all those things. Not because they're bad people, just because they're so busy making it look good on paper, they don't have time to do all of that. And for a patient to just thank us for doing what we're there to do, helping the man in the room next to him get his breakfast tray ready, is really unconscionable to me. And it made me cry, and it made my student cry. And so I looked at my student and I said, and this is why, in addition to having my own small private practice, this is why I'm back to teach. Because we need to remember why we went into this discipline in the first place.
I was at your website, and I was absolutely astonished. It talks about your fees, and in that description, it talks about an hour. Dr.
Yeah.
Pennick,
Yeah.
an hour. You spend like the minimum amount of time that you allocate, as far as I can tell. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is a half an hour.
Right,
I can't imagine.
Yeah. Well, good. Okay. So people say to me when they come to see me, I will spend an hour And if there's nobody on the schedule behind them, which is getting rarer and rarer because I'm getting really booked solid because I'm only in the office about 7 hours a week, I would give them 2 hours if there was nobody behind them, and I really wouldn't charge them an extra fee. But how could anybody possibly get to know a new person unless you spent a minimum of an hour with them? How could you possibly even know what you're supposed to do or get enough information? And people are astonished that they get that when they come to me, and I said, I couldn't even begin to pretend to know what to do with or for you if I didn't at least have that much time. And usually an hour is adequate, not always, and so we don't always get everything planned in that first visit that we need to, but we eventually get to it. But I work for myself, and I regulate my own time, and so I feel sorry for my colleagues who work for someone else and work for a company or an organization or a big system or a big insurance plan because they have to see people sometimes every 7.5 minutes. Now, not a new patient. They might get 15 or 30 minutes with a new patient. I don't know if they can do that all the time. But I control my schedule, and an hour minimum. Some of my services are an hour and a half. But I don't play the insurance game. I don't accept insurance. And so when people get to me and they want to complain about that, I say, you wouldn't be sitting in my office if the care that your health care insurance paid for you got you your outcomes you wanted or got you to your health care goals. You're sitting here because that system didn't work for you. And quite honestly, I'm worth what you pay me.
Dr. Pennick, your hourly rate is lower than the 7.5-minute rate.
Yeah, but you know what happens then? People fall victim to my healthcare insurance company is supposed to take care of me. And so they get their explanation of benefits, but because they only have to pay a $25, $35, $40 copay, they don't really pay attention to the fact that that hour-long visit was billed to their insurance company at $300, $400, $500, $600, $700.
Yeah.
And so because they didn't have to pay that, then my rates look ridiculous at $175 for a new patient, or if you're already a patient of mine in my practice and you want an hour of my time, it's $125. I say to them, the next time you get your explanation of benefits, look at that. So I had an attorney come to see me one day, and when it was time to pay, he said, I don't understand why you don't take my insurance. And I said, I don't have to. And I said, let me ask you a question, counselor. I said, you scheduled with me today. Why? And he says, well, because I needed to talk to somebody who had some additional information. And I said, let me ask you another question, counselor. I said, why do people come see you? He says, well, they need additional information because I know something they don't know. And I said, correct. And you came to see me today because I know something that you don't know. We can't all be experts in everything. And I said, counselor, what's your hourly rate? He said, Julie, let me write out your check. Because I knew his hourly rate was $350. And he just admitted he was sitting in my office to gain access to what I paid to educate myself for, just like he paid to educate himself to be an attorney. And he never complains. He graciously gives me my money. And I told him, I said, and guess what, counselor? I don't even charge for phone calls in between visits, and I don't charge for email communications. Now, if you want me to follow your model, I'd be more than happy to bill you for all of that. So he saw very quickly the value he had in the service that I provided.
He thought he was in court and he was going to lose the case.
So it's really tragic and it's really sad because since you and I are old enough to know, it used to be called hospitalization insurance. And it covered those big, awful things that happened to people when they ended up in the hospital. You and I both know that when our parents had to think about whether they could take us to the doctor for an earache or sore throat, they had to think long and hard about that because they had to pay for that out of their pocket. There was no managed care system that paid. So when I was in somebody else's practice who accepted insurance, and these mothers would call and ask the nurses, what do they do for a fever in their kid of 101? I would tell the nurse, tell them to call their mother because their mother knew how to take care of that. Mm-hmm. Their mother didn't have a $25 copay and took the kid every time to the doctor every time the kid had a stuffy runny nose or, something like that. And so we have fallen victim to that, I think, as a society, that my health care insurance company is responsible for taking care of me. And that's just not the case. If we don't get back to personal responsibility in healthcare choices, and did you hear this morning on national news, your American Medical Association has decided to term obesity now as a disease.
Yeah.
Yeah. obesity is a disease now. Now, I can't wait to see the implications that's going to bring to the healthcare insurance industry.
Yeah, and alcoholism is a disease too.
Right. Yeah. And the argument that the presenter said this morning was obesity changes your brain chemistry and your brain function. Well, so does alcoholism. Changes your chemistry and your brain function. And so, but there are some personal choices, and I'm not saying everybody who's obese wants to be obese. Please don't hear me saying that. Some people have what I call subclinical endocrine or subclinical hormone issues that once corrected, they can get rid of the weight they want to get rid of. But that's not recognized all the time in a conventional setting.
Dr. Julie Pennick, making friends one broadcast at a time. Dr. Julie Pennick, we love you. You are right on the money. I'm Vin Finelli. We'll be right back. Julie Pennick's with us, and she is saying it as it really is. She's talking about medicine, she's talking about ethics, and she's talking about personal responsibility. She's talking about terminology that we've changed. We've changed the term. We now call alcoholism a disease. We call obesity a disease. And I absolutely agree with you, Dr. Pennick, that I don't think everybody wants to be obese. I think that there are many reasons that I've seen for it, medical as well as, even fluoride. Even fluoride is causing obesity. And I know our class really appreciates what you're teaching us today, because I don't believe many of us have heard the things that you are saying, the way that you're saying, and the absolute truthfulness of what you're saying. And I want to thank you.
Isn't that kind of sad? And so let me tag on two things you said. Fluoride can be a part of the obesity issue because fluoride as a halogen, think back to high school chemistry, it's a halogen, and so it has a different molecular weight, and it has a particular affinity because iodine is a halogen, and so you need iodine to make thyroid hormone. But if fluoride gets to the receptor first, then iodine can't bind where it's supposed to, and you can't make thyroid hormone. And so then you have what we call an endocrine problem, a hormone system problem. Not necessarily that's going to show up on a blood test, but it could show up on a urine test if somebody went looking for it. And so that's one of the issues. And the other issue is I saw a great documentary over the weekend called Fathead. I don't know if you've seen it. But the documentary talks about we, the American public, have been subject to the greatest nutritional experiment for the last 4 decades on low fat, which calculates into high carb, high sugar, which causes a problem with insulin resistance. And since insulin is a fat storing hormone, everybody who has a weight issue is told to do low fat, low fat, low fat, which is high carb, high carb, high carb. They eat a lot of grains, and they exacerbate their problem. And we have the obesity epidemic because everybody's afraid to eat fat. And we have, in addition to the obesity epidemic, we have the largest number of people being diagnosed with type 2 diabetes than we've had in decades.
So it's not working. So it's absolutely not working.
You know, when people come into my practice and they say, oh, I have a really good diet, I said, I'll be the judge of that. I said, because I said, if you're eating the way, and I'm going to be very unpopular when I say this, I said, if the American Heart Association or the American Diabetes Association had the nutritional model correct, they would have put themselves out of business decades ago. I don't believe they're in it to be self-perpetuating. I just think that's wrong. I don't think they want people to continue to have diabetes and heart disease. I just think that they bought into the experiment where we were told fat is bad for you and carbs are good. Yeah.
Julie, let me share this with you. I've gone head-to-head with BMW. We've had one of our students that had a problem with his BMW, and it looked to me like it was a recall issue. I called BMW North America, and I said, I'm going to report this. And they said, you know what? We're going to be glad to fix that $6,000 problem for your student for free. Okay, we've gone head-to-head with they had a recall issue, and it wasn't a recall. They didn't talk about it, but we forced their hand. We forced Fish and Wildlife's hand when they were going to bring to court a mother whose 11-year-old daughter rescued a woodpecker that fell out of a nest, and they were going to charge her, and she was going to pay a $540 fine and face 1 year in jail. The mother, for the daughter rescuing a woodpecker. We've gone head to head with the city of Orlando, where they were fining a family $500 a day for growing a garden in their front yard. Well, we forced them to change their zoning ordinance because we exposed them. So these are just a few of the head-on collisions that we've had here at USA Prepares, and we've won every one of them. But the fluoride one is the only one that we can't seem to win, no matter what we do. And I'd like to talk about that when we come back. We've given out the names, we've given out the numbers, we've put people who are putting fluoride in the water, we've held them personally responsible. Nothing can fix this fluoride thing. And when we get back, I'd like to talk about Detroit and fluoride and the menace that fluoride is causing with Dr. Julie Pennick. I'm Vin Finelli. Stay tuned for hour number 2 of USAPrepares.com. We'll be right back. Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? This is hour number 2 of USAPrepares.com. Dr. Julie Pennick's with us. Dr. Pennick, I'd like to make a comment on the TWA Flight 800 crash. Do you remember that back in 1996?
Oh, yeah, long time ago.
Very interesting. Well, I had said on air over a couple of years I've been on that I was driving from a consulting appointment I had during the day. I was returning back to the farm in the evening, and I was listening to WABC radio, New York City, and I was able to listen to that because it traveled a long way in the evening. And I was in Virginia at the time, and I was listening to WABC, and Curtis Sliwa was on. He's the founder of the Guardian Angels in New York City. He's also a broadcaster. And a caller called up and said, Curtis, a missile went up and it just blew up a plane that just took off. And Curtis said, oh, come on. And the caller was really in a panic. He said, no, I'm not kidding. This is real. And so Curtis said, okay, I'll tell you what. Let's go to a commercial break. And I'll go check the AP wire, the Associated Press wire, and we'll come back and I'll see what it says. So he came back a couple minutes later and he said, there's nothing on the news, there are no news reports about this happening. And the caller said, right, that's exactly right, because it just happened just seconds ago. So Curtis said, okay, let's clear the lines, and we'll just take calls who have witnessed this and call in and tell us what you've seen. So call after call came in. Now, I've heard this with my own ears. Call after call came in, and they all said the same thing. A missile went up, the plane blew up and fell down. And so that was the story, that a missile went up and blew up this plane in 1996. And then, now Curtis spent a lot of time on the air. It almost seemed like he slept at WABC. And I believe he did, many days. And so he was always on the air. He was on the air the next morning doing a broadcast, and there was no mention of the crash. It was almost like it never happened.
Wow.
Okay, and then there are all these theories about, an external event, a missile. I mean, the things that I said that I heard with my own ears, the missile going up, from caller after caller after caller saying that, and then it was debunked. That a couple years later, people would come on the air and they'd say, yeah, the authorities came over to the house and they talked to us and they said, no, your eyes do funny things. What you think is going up is actually wreckage coming down. So those weren't missiles going up. That was actually the wreckage falling, and your eyes play, funny tricks on you, and your mind does funny things. And people started calling and saying, we got approached by the authorities and they're telling us the exact opposite of what we saw. Well, I know what I heard live when it happened, and it was a missile went up and the plane was taken out from these missiles. Well, there's now a report, and I just posted it on the website, and that's what I'm talking about. It just happened. And the report says it was an external detonation. Okay, and CNN is going to have a documentary on this, so that's why I'm talking about that. So, class, if you want to know more about it, I believe it was absolutely, positively a missile that went up. That's what I heard with my own ears. I don't believe it was being made up by caller after caller after caller that I heard on WABC radio in New York City in 1996. So I just wanted to share that with you, Julie.
Wow, interesting.
Yep. So we hear about these conspiracy theories, as those of us who follow some of them and have information that we've learned that we're nuts. Well, actually, sometimes we're proven, and more often than not, we are proven not to be nuts. I wanted to share this with you about fluoride. So we have gone after BMW, and we encourage them to fix a $6,000 steering problem, which was a computer-controlled steering problem on their BMW Z4. We got the city of Orlando to reverse their zoning ordinance about growing gardens in the front yard. We got the Fish and Wildlife in Virginia to back down and not fine this mother of an 11-year-old for rescuing a woodpecker, and have her face a year in jail for having her daughter rescue a woodpecker. I mean, there are many of these cases. And one of them that we've taken on we've spent more time on this fluoride issue than any other issue we have tackled. And we have not gotten traction. And here's what I'd like to share with you. There's something really big in fluoride. Either these politicians are being paid so much money that they will not back down. I think that's what it is. But here's the point. Detroit, Michigan is absolutely, positively broke. They can't afford to turn the street lights on in some areas. They can't afford to fix the sidewalks. They're actually bulldozing down neighborhoods because they can't even patrol them with police. Now, if that's the case, how can they afford fluoride? That's what I want to know.
Well, is fluoride expensive to purchase? Do we know that?
Yes, and in the Springfield community, I was able to get the numbers. It's about $1 per person per year. So a couple $100,000 is what it costs to put fluoride in the water. Now,
wow.
$1 a person a year, that's no big deal. But if you look at it as $200,000 we could save,
right?
Without poisoning us, why wouldn't we do that? Why would fluoride is the only thing that's added to water.
Why do you think it's such a sacred cow?
Well, I think there's so much money to be made in distributing an industrial waste that.
Well, that's what I was going to say. It is the byproduct, as I understand it from a speaker at a conference. Fluoride is a waste product from the manufacturing or the processing of aluminum. Is that true?
Yeah, that's true.
And so they needed a place to put this waste. And so they came up with the argument that fluoride can increase the strength of your teeth. And
right.
At one time, they used to use fluoride to treat osteoporosis. But what they found was by making the bone thicker, you didn't repair the strut system underneath it. In other words, if you came and laid a new layer of asphalt on top of an old bridge that had core support, you might have made the top of the bridge thicker, but you certainly didn't make it any stronger, right? Mm-hmm. And so they abandoned that. But the fluoride in our water does displace iodine from hormone sites or iodine-binding sites that's important for the hormone system in the body.
Yeah, and there's got to be so much money in this that really, here's what I said. This is probably one of the final nails in my coffin in the afternoon broadcast. I said, you can murder somebody quickly. You can shoot them. You can put them in front of a cannon. You can put them in a guillotine, and you can kill them quickly, or you can kill them slowly. But it's still murder. And if you're taking years off a person's life, is that not murder? If you are making them sick to the point where they're debilitated, or they have heart disease because of their body condition, because of the fluoride, is that not murder? Well, I think I was poking at a sacred cow, And
Wow.
I think that, yeah, well, I called it murder on the afternoon broadcast, and I went after it. And man, oh man, the result is I've got my afternoons off. Dr. Pennock, we have Gail from Nixa, Missouri on. Gail, you're on with Dr. Julie Pennock.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I have a question that it's not related to fluoride. It's about bruising. The back of my hands bruise real easily. All I've got to do is look at them real hard, or they'll bruise. What can I do to help alleviate that?
That is almost always a deficiency in the vitamin C system in your body. And when you're low on that, then your capillaries are very fragile. So I usually tell people to get on a bioflavonoid supplement.
Right.
Something like rutin or something, only because the bioflavonoid is the same family as vitamin C, but they're more concentrated, so it takes less to do that. And that's the first place I would start.
Okay. Can do. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Gail, any other questions?
That's it for the moment. Thank you.
Hey, great. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Dr. Pennock, you've got a pretty big fan club, and the proof of that is when you come to the Get Prepared Expo, your seminar room, your students do not want to leave.
No, I know. Kind of hard to get out of there sometimes. but it's okay. I enjoy it. It's fun to be able to speak truth and have people be able to ask questions in a non-judgmental, non-threatening environment, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what I noticed was I think you were going probably 50% longer than the scheduled time, and your students were they were paying attention. They had so many questions, and I think it's because they were hearing you say things that they thought might be true,
Sure.
but they hadn't heard before.
Correct. And there was a sense of validation.
Right, that's exactly right. There was a sense of validation of what, and I think it was so refreshing, and they heard easy to administer, if you will, solutions to their concerns. So for example, Gail just called with a bruising issue. Who do you think that if he went to a mainstream clinic in his community, that he would have gotten that same advice?
No, he would have had some lab tests done, all of which would probably have looked normal on a piece of paper.
Right.
And they might not have had any suggestions. But, the bioflavonoid issue is a nutritional model. And so in their defense, conventional medicine, healthcare, education does not include a whole lot on nutrition.
There you go. Dr. Julie Pennock, PennockHealthcare.com. And I put a post, I copied, I hope it's okay with you, Julie, I copied page 1 of your website, posted at USA Prepares, so you get an understanding. Dr. Julie Pennock's with us. And Dr. Pennock, the economy is spiraling down. The weather is totally unpredictable. We have supply line shortages. Are people asking you in your practice what your thoughts on preparedness are relating to medical conditions and being healthy? Are they saying to you, I'm really concerned that I might not be able to go to a doctor for an appointment? I know that in our family, if somebody wanted to make a doctor's appointment, it's a month out. So if someone were sick, it's a month to get an appointment. Are they asking you those kinds of questions?
Well, there is a national shortage of healthcare professionals, particularly what we call the primary care level, which is the first point of contact with the system, right? And so there's a huge shortage and projected to be even worse by the year 2020 or 2025. Mm-hmm. So, no, people don't ask me that question per se, because the nature of the people that I see are people who either have been to have personal accountability and responsibility for healthcare choices before they get to me, or they sure get a lecture about that once they get to me. And so we don't depend on the system. We depend on ourselves, and we depend on making lifestyle choices every moment of every day that are consistent with optimum health and wellness. And so I don't hear much about that. Sometimes at the conference or the expo, I hear people say, well, what are substitutes for medications? And I said, good health. You don't have to, and you shouldn't plan for what medications or what substitute you're going to have for a medication when the system, or if the system collapses. What you need to do is get your body healthy enough that you don't need a medication, so you don't have a need to replace a medication.
That's really the point. The point is we absolutely, positively must be healthy. We must pay attention to what we're eating. We must pay attention to what we're drinking, and the toxins around us. Will you be doing your seminar on the Sea of Poisons, or are you thinking about something else for? I understand that you're going to be with us on the 21st of next month at the Get Prepared Expo, which is a Sunday. But what are your thoughts? What will we be learning from you on the 21st?
Well, I love to do the Sea of Toxins, and I've done that a couple of times, so I might have some repeat individuals in the audience. So what I would really like to talk about is the experiment that we've all unwittingly been made participants of, which is the low-fat dietary models and the flaw in that, and how that has led us down the road to obesity, insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, and the sale of the leading drug in the world, which is Lipitor, which is a statin medication to control cholesterol levels, and the reality that no one over the age of 65, there's no evidence to suggest anybody over the age of 65 should be on a statin drug, and there is no evidence to suggest that the majority of women should be on it. Yet, my mother, my 90-year-old mother, cardiologist, wanted her on a statin drug, for which I immediately took her off and called the office to inform them that she would not be taking that medicine. And the nurse said, well, the doctor's not going to be happy about that. And I said, well, you put in the record that the nurse practitioner daughter of this 90-year-old woman is not happy with the fact that he doesn't understand their own literature, their own data that says an individual who is considered geriatric age, which is age 65 and above, should have a cholesterol level. Let me say this really loud for your listening audience. If you're in that geriatric population, Dr. John Morley, Morley, published research in the 90s that said you darn well better make sure you have a cholesterol level in the 240 to 260 range for optimum health. And when you drive a cholesterol level down in a 90-year-old, you decrease their fat to their brain, which means they're going to start getting symptoms that look like dementia or Alzheimer's. Don't think most 90-year-olds are still having a sexual life, although if they are, you're going to decrease all the production of their sex hormones and make them frustrated. And when you decrease a healthy intake of fat and you decrease somebody's cholesterol level, you start getting symptoms that are consistent with the diagnosis of depression.
And what does that lead to? What does depression lead to? Let's talk about that when we come back on the other side. Dr. Julie Pennick's going to be at the Get Prepared Expo, July 21st. That's a Sunday. We'll be right back. Julie Pennick's with us. Dr. Pennick, I had a question about the sun. You know, when I'm out there on the tractor raking hay, I get more sun than, I'm out there for hours and hours and hours. And I believe that I become more tired after being in the real hot sun, not the temperature, but I'm talking about the sun's rays, than I would if I were just in that heat without being in the sun's rays. Is that mind over matter, or is that something that happens physiologically?
Well, Vince, I've never had that question raised before, so I've really never even thought about that.
Okay. Well, I can tell you that even when I was younger, if I were swimming and I just put one of those towels down and lay on the towel face down, and got the sun's rays on all of me, except for where my bathing suit was, I would become more and more tired the longer I lay in the sun. I could actually fall asleep, just lying in the sun. So that was where my question was going. How about, we've got a post on the website, and it says that too much red meat in your diet can raise the risk of developing type 2 diabetes by nearly 50%. And, a large consumption of red meat could cause that, according to this article. Do you think that's possible?
What source is that article? Because I've never heard that statistic raised before.
Okay, that's on our website. It's let's see. Let me get to it. Get you exactly.
Now, if that's truth and reality, I'm going to be really sad about that.
Yeah. Okay. It says here, this source is the Daily Mail, United Kingdom, and it says that red meat plays an important part in a balanced diet. And it also says that if you have too much of it, you can increase the risk of type 2 diabetes. And it says cutting consumption by half a serving a day led to a 14% cut in the risk of type 2 diabetes. So what they're saying is you should have it, but don't overdo it. And I'm thinking that I don't have diabetes, but I don't eat a lot of meat either. I only have about, at the most, 4 ounces a day, at the most. But I'm not a vegetarian.
Or meat, period?
Meat, period.
Oh, okay.
Am I doing something wrong?
Well, we need adequate protein because protein is the body's tool and fuel for growth and repair. Uh-huh. And so we need to have a good consumption of protein. And you can certainly get protein out of your vegetables. Absolutely, you can. Most of us do not chew our vegetables well enough to truly liberate the full maximum potential of the protein that's in our vegetables. Mm-hmm. And so I tell folks because a lot of women don't like meat. They don't like it texturally. They tend to be carb-based eaters. And so what I say to my women is that's fine. You need to get in at least, I tell them, 20 to 25 grams of protein each of their 3 meals. And so if they don't, I have them supplement with a plant-based protein that they turn into a shake or something. And I have them take a digestive enzyme with it because just because you put something in your mouth, whether it's all organic, healthy, blah, 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 your digestive system is just a tube. And anything that goes in your digestive system requires active transport to get it out of the tube and into the body for use. So you can be putting what anybody would call the perfect diet into your mouth. But if you don't get it out of the tube, it's worthless, right? Mm-hmm. And so I do think that if you're chewing your vegetables enough and you're liberating the protein value out of that, then you're doing fine. But I would strongly encourage you to look critically at that issue because I don't think 4 ounces of meat as your main source of protein is adequate for most people. Now,
okay.
I'm gonna flip that and tell you. Here's the bipolar nature of me. I am going to tell you that the people of the China study and the people of several bodies have looked at almost a starvation type diet and found that individuals can have longevity in that. They can grow to an older age. I'm going to tell you what I believe the connection with that is. Remember, I said you ate the perfect diet, but if you don't get it out of the tube, it's really for naught.
Right.
You have to have enzymes to digest and assimilate those nutrients. You have to have sodium to actively pull carbohydrates and proteins across the gut wall into the body. And so aldosterone, which is the hormone responsible for sodium regulation, is at the level of the adrenals, and the adrenals are particularly sensitive to stress. And I really don't know very many people who don't have stress in their life. And so I think at best we need to help with some enzymes to assimilate those foods so that we can put them to good use. But there is some research out there that suggests that if you limit flesh, meat, and have predominantly a plant-based diet and almost low amounts of those so that it's almost like starvation mode, you will live longer. And I think the connection there is that you conserve enzymes that would be used in the digestive process for metabolic processes when you don't have to digest large amounts of foods, and those enzymes then go to use in other processes in the body. So I think if you eat adequately and you take enzymes from outside the body to help so you don't diminish all the enzymes in the body, that you can eat a regular, full, satisfying dietary lifestyle and still live to be 100, 120, particularly if you follow anything Dr. Shealy says, right? Because he says we should live to be 120.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so when you talk about digestive enzymes, can you tell us exactly what you mean? Is there a specific brand, a specific type, either generic or...
Yeah, I do a lot of work with enzyme therapies, both for digestion and to treat metabolic processes, particularly inflammation. And so, just in the nutshell, we require enzyme activity for every metabolic process in the body. And if we're wasting all of that trying to digest foods that we weren't intended to digest or just digest food, then we steal the resources we need from metabolic processes. You know, enzymes play a role in the manufacture of energy, adenosine triphosphate. And so enzymes play a huge role in the metabolic processes of the body. And when we eat dead foods, like the typical American does, packaged and processed and cooked to death, we have removed the enzymes for shelf life, and we have cooked the enzymes out of them because most of your food sources contain the enzymes required to break that down. That's God's wisdom. But when you get a food cooked, you've cooked all the enzyme activity out of it, and then you have to use your enzyme system. And when we eat dead food, which is packaged, processed, and cooked to death foods, which most of us cook our foods, right, we get rid of the enzymes intrinsic in the substance, and we have to use our own enzyme. And you think back, in earlier times, we didn't have as much packaged and processed. People used things that were in season. They didn't cook the life out of them. They certainly didn't have additives and preservatives that we were never designed to digest. And the whole genetically modified issue, there's a whole new condition out there that they don't understand. And it's because those genetic modified foods have foreign DNA, not only to the human body consuming it, but to the organism that it's been spliced with to grow it faster, quicker, whatever. And we don't have an enzyme to digest that. And when you don't digest it, it sits in the small intestine particularly, and it causes an inflammatory response. And we're giving gluten a bad name, but gluten is not the problem. It is the genetically modified gluten molecules that we lack enzymes to digest. And therefore, you could supplement with enzymes from outside the body to digest those and avoid genetically modified foods whenever possible. That's a roundabout answer to your question, isn't it?
Well, I'll tell you what you said was absolutely fascinating, because you described why so many alternative therapy type individuals are saying no gluten, no gluten, no gluten. You're saying it's because the wheat has been modified, genetically modified, and we can't digest it properly.
Correct.
That is the problem.
Yeah, that is the problem. And I read an article probably 6 years ago, a research study in one of the biochemical journals, that said not only can we not digest that because we lack the enzymes to do so, that foreign genetic material is taking residence and host in your small intestines and growing its own material. Think about that for a second. That's DNA, right? That's what they mean by genetically modified. That's foreign DNA taking root in your body, doing its own thing. And we wonder why we have so many gut issues in this country and why so many people are, all of a sudden, we have so much gluten intolerance. Now, gluten's on the scene, but gluten's not the criminal. It's the genetic modification of that.
And there's such a great proportion of wheat that's genetically modified that if you have anything that's made with wheat, it's almost impossible not to have GMO wheat.
Correct, unless you were blessed enough to have had ancient grain wheat, and you never let it get into the system. But if you got it, you better not let anybody know you have it. You know, because somebody discovered a field of wheat growing up, I think it was in Oregon, and it was on a Monsanto's test bead. It was never supposed to be released, and they found a whole field of that growing somewhere in Oregon, and nobody can figure out how it ever got out to do that. And here's the other issue. The other big issue, corn is an issue. It's another grain. We don't tend to think of it as a grain, but it's another grain. It's a problem because the fungicides that they use have some genetic material because they make them very virulent to keep the funguses off the corn, right? And so corn is probably a contaminated GMO food ubiquitously as well.
Well, let me mention a problem that I have. Dr. Pennick, if I eat corn that is GMO, I get an instantaneous stomach eruptus. I mean, it is really painful to beat the band, and I believe it's related to GMO. If I have organic, non-GMO corn, I'm fine. Let's talk about that when we come back. Dr. Julie Pennick, PennickHealthcare.com. Dr. Pennick, I was talking about when I have corn that comes out of a can that's genetically modified, I get stomach eruptus. It's just excruciating pain. And when I have corn that is not genetically modified, I do not get that pain. And here's a post on the internet on Alex Jones' site, Infowars.com. China incinerates 3 U.S. shipments of genetically modified corn. Then there's another post that says Monsanto's GMO corn to be sold at Walmart with no indication of that it is genetically modified. And then there's another one that says Monsanto's GMO corn is linked to organ failure in rats. So it sure seems like there's a serious problem with genetically modifying our food supply.
Huge, serious problem. I would echo everything that you just talked about. We do not possess the ability to digest that. And so why we allow this to be perpetrated on the unsuspecting public is beyond me. So people out there need to be talking about this. So I actually plan on attending some professional healthcare conferences in the next year talking about this emerging new trend that we see, which is the destruction that is taking place in the digestive system. This comes on the heels, and I've got to talk real briefly about one other problem that most people don't see. As you are aware, I missed the last expo because my mother had a serious accident. 90-year-old type 2 diabetic who had a severe injury and should have lost her leg, but her leg is healed. But let me tell you what I did. I made sure she got extra protein because protein is what we use for healing, and I took her off of her reflux medicine because the majority of those medicines decrease stomach acid production. The resting pH of the stomach is about 5 to 6. The purpose of the production of stomach acid is to bring the resting pH of the stomach down to about 3 or slightly below, so pepsinogen can be converted to pepsin. Pepsin's the enzyme system, the human enzyme system that digests protein. So all of those people who have wounds or all of those people who need growth and repair who are on those drugs, you virtually have told the body, well, we're not going to digest this protein because you can't get the pH low enough to change pepsinogen to pepsin. And we are robbing these people of nutritional sources of protein. And the wound clinic is amazed that my 90-year-old mom's diabetic mother's leg healed in under 90 days when they all thought she would lose her leg. And it's because I took her off the drug that blocked her digestion of protein. I added extra quality protein and gave her enzymes to make sure that it got into her body. And that's the other thing. We are just letting people stay on these drugs for forever, and we have pretty much robbed these people of the ability to ever get adequate protein for growth and repair.
Dr. Pennick, I can't count the number of people who I know that have been prescribed reflux, acid reflux medicines. It's almost like it's candy. Here, take this. It's good for you.
Yeah, it is like candy, and I believe it's one of the top 3 over-the-counter medicine sales in the United States. That, ibuprofen, and something for constipation are the top 3 selling drugs, over-the-counter and or prescription. A lot of people are on these drugs by prescription. These are powerful drugs causing huge problems that most people don't even recognize. And it's tragic. That's another experiment on the general public, in my opinion.
Inflammation, constipation, acid reflux, aren't they all related based on what you've taught us today in class?
Based on exactly what we talked about today, yes. If you can't break it down and digest it, it sits in the body and causes inflammation. If you can't break it down and digest it, it can lead to constipation. And one of the things that keeps the fecal material moist and moving is the presence of bile that dumps into the small intestine. And bile is the most alkaline substance in the body, where stomach acid is the most acidic. If you shut down the acidic stimulation, you shut down the alkaline response. So you are creating a constipation issue in many people by shutting down stomach acid production.
What a racket. Cause the problem and then have 2 solutions that are also medicines. Dr. Julie Pennick.
The dots.
Connecting the dots. Dr. Julie Pennick, if you'd like to meet her at the Get Prepared Expo, that'd be July 21. She's going to be there in about a month. Dr. Julie Pennick, thank you so much for being with us today. PennickHealthCare.com. There's a link to Dr. Julie Pennick, page 1, USAPrepares.com, bottom of the page. Dr. Pennick, thanks so much for being with us. Class, above all, honesty and integrity. What happens next is up to you.